Now, the wealthy have mastered this art. So what you do is that you set up a cash trust or trust fund, and then below it, you buy a whole life cover for you, your spouse, and any child who is above the age of 18. So let's say I have a cover of 15 million, my spouse have another cover of 15 million. One thing is for sure, if God forbid something happens and we're no longer there, we shall have like 30 million being injected in our cash trust. Wills will always be challenged, and that process goes through the court process where there are a lot of handles. Guys, welcome again to our channel, that is Kenya Insurance Hub, where we discuss matters to do with insurance, inheritance, to do with the livestock and crop insurance. But today I want us to go on with a conversation we've had, and I don't know, guys, whether you know or you've ever had this, that 70 to 90% of all the wealth that is created by the first generation, by the time it's going to the second generation, or by the time this second generation is exiting, all this money, most of it will have been gone. And did you also know that when it comes to matters inheritance, the people who becomes victim are children and mothers, or rather wives. There's also another study that was done, and it was concluded that it can take you up to 10 years to unlock the assets that were left by your fathers in the event that process goes through the legal the court way. The reason as to why I want us to have this discussion is because we've seen a lot of drama coming up recently, where a family may be divorced, and may either mother or father dies, and you see a lot of fights, because most likely the moment you bring in another maybe spouse, you kind of have two families who are fighting to get access to what you've left. But one of the most interesting thing is there's a report that was also released recently by a body called UFA, that is Unclaimed Fund, Unclaimed Financial Asset Authority, where they were saying that so far they've received about 50 billion, and about 240 billion is yet to be released to them. That says one thing, that there are people who are possibly suffering, yet they have a lot of money lying idle. And that is why I want us to have this particular discussion. There are different kinds of people, but this is something that is standard across. Death is standard to everyone, and most likely it comes unannounced. Now it is very, very important, because a lot of Africans are very, very hardworking people. But there are two documents they always kind of fail to have, which I'll disclose in our later conversation. So what you'll find is that majority of people in Africa, or rather to be specific, in Kenya, dies intestate, that is not having written anything to guide the family. There are other peoples who are more proactive, and they have had at some point sat down with a lawyer and drafted something called a will. And there's another category that they have something called a trust. The challenges with these two, the intestate individuals and the will guys, is that there are a lot of problems that are involved in that. Number one is, for intestate, we don't really want to dwell on that, because we obviously knows that is very obvious, there will be some fights. But these other guys who have wills, most of the time you will find that this will will have to go through the court process. And a lot of times you find that family will have some disputes. So you find that this guy firstborn has his own will, another guy has brought his own will, yeah, quote unquote. Wills will always be challenged, and that process goes through the court process, where there are a lot of handles and a lot of parties involved. I want to say this, that their families up to date, 20 years down the line, are still in the court, yeah, for their cases to be resolved. And during this time, that money is lying idle, number one. Number two, it is locked from access. There is no sale that can be done with this, and the family are suffering every day. And that is why I want to tell you this. There are a couple of stages under the probate process, and there are a lot of parties that are involved in this. Number one, we find lawyers, we find government agencies, we find taxations, we have, that is KRA, we find creditors, we find family disputes. So before all this is settled, it is maybe 5 years, 10 years down the line. And most likely, you could have had small children, and the money is locked. So what happens to these children? They most obviously move from those good schools to schools that are not very organized, so to speak. So to avoid all this chaos, you also need to establish few things which I can guide you. But again, something you cannot forget is, by the time all these parties, yeah, are done with you, most likely 40 to 60% of what you had amassed is gone, with taxation, with lawyers, with these government agencies, with creditors, with whoever. Yeah, that is, even as you set up this, you must consider several other factors, and because you understand that majority of people in, especially Kenya, want to use banks. There is a rise in money market fund. There is also something called the SACCOs. You need to understand that how they are structured is that their paperwork include something called next of kin. Yeah, for example, if you go to a bank, in the application form, they usually ask you who should be your next of kin. That has a very big effect when the inheritance comes in, because for next of kin, anybody could become your next of kin. Yeah, and that means that it is only a court of law that could determine who should really be your beneficiary. So you go to a bank, you go to SACCOs, you go to Safaricom, you go to Airtel, you go to these institutions. In their form, it's written next of kin. But instead, there are other institutions that uses the word beneficiary. For example, pension fund uses beneficiary. Insurance policies, medical cover, yes, to some extent. Life cover, so those includes beneficiary. That one means that in the event you're no longer there, your things should go directly to them. There's no court that should be involved in this process. So I've kind of preempted what I want you to set up. So there are basically two main documents that I feel you should really consider. And today we have like two major organizations that have come up or brought up that. And what I'm talking of is something called trust fund. Yeah, for trust fund, basically this is a financial tool you use for inheritance. And one of the advantages of a trust fund is, number one, you avoid all these court cases. You avoid creditors because you and the trust fund are two different entities. Number 3, under trust fund, it also helps you to kind of dodge taxation. Yeah. At the same time, whatever is under trust fund continues to grow even when you are no longer there. But most importantly is that you have 100% control over this trust fund while you are alive, while you are still living. Yes, that is some of the benefits. But basically what you find this trust fund having is that it's composed of 3 things. 1, it has something called deed or instruction, a set of instruction saying who should inherit you, when, that is time, what amount, and how. Yeah, so that is 1. We call it trust deed. At the same time, trust fund has something very important called the beneficiaries. You being the founder could also become a beneficiary. Another thing is, for trust fund, it has appointed trustee. That is, in the event you're no longer there are those people who should take over and start running this. You could have private trustee. You could also set up something called a corporate trustee. So basically those are the benefits. And what I've said is, whatever investment that is under trust continues to grow even when you are no longer there. Now, we have 2 types of trust. We have something called cash trust, and we have another thing called the family trust fund. These 2 have a different setup. What you'll find is, for cash trust, you pay 0% to set it up, and the only amount that you are required to put is like 50,000. The money keeps on growing, and it's still your investment. But again, you could be having smaller amount. You could start with as low as 5,000. Yeah, so this one helps you. It's your house that collects all the financial asset across other financial institutions. For example, you have your cash trust here, but again you have a life insurance in a certain insurance. Let's talk of we have company A. This company is your trust fund, right? But again, you have company B, that is being an insurance company. You have pension, you have benefit like group life, you have like other financial assets across. So what you tell this trust fund is to become the ultimate beneficiary of this. Instead of you appointing your family member in this, maybe you have a whole life cover in a certain company. Yeah, you tell it that this being my trust fund, every time in the event of my death, you should receive all these funds from different institutions. So now you have one basket. So cash trust only deals with financial or liquid assets. But again, we have on the other side something called family trust fund. This incorporates both cash and properties and businesses, and also motor vehicles, or what we would refer to as the hard asset. So to set up this, because it has some experts that are involved. We have the tax expert, we have the lawyers, we have the government agencies. It has some small fee of about 300,000, which helps you to set up everything. That gives you kind of an average. That is what I'll tell you, because that trust or family trust fund, just like under the cash trust, it contains some instruction, meaning that if you have properties under this family trust, if you have businesses, if you have this, as long as you are alive, you continue running this trust. But the moment you die, the trustee takes over and they execute your instruction to the latter, meaning that if you have a business that is making a lot of money, you could also having rental properties, you could be having some other assets, you make sure that these assets really benefit those family members under your bloodline without discrimination. Because what happens is once you erect or you appoint, let's say, someone who is a family member, sometimes they become greedy. That is what I will tell you. But an independent person does not have any interest. Yeah. So what we encourage or what we advise is this trust fund is basically your house, and it requires constant cash injection so that it grows. The easiest way of growing these trusts is by setting up something under it called the whole life cover. One of the biggest tool you can use, because as I said in the beginning, is that once you are born, the only other guaranteed thing is at some point you will die. So how does the whole life cover work? It's very simple. It makes sure that if I die, the family is left with a lump sum. If I become disabled, I have the lump sum. If I become terminally ill, I also have a lump sum. But on top of it, the moment I will die, again, some other amount will be injected to this trust fund. So this is how you should. Let's take a simple case of a guy who is about 35 years. And let's say you have taken a whole life cover of 15 million. It would cost you about 11,700 per month for the next 15 years. That is tentatively about 2 million, which you have injected in that insurance policy, and your cover limit is 15 million. So the beauty about the life insurance is that immediately you buy this, your value goes by 15 million. What does that mean? That you have become wealthy, because 15 million is not a small amount, by just investing 11,000. You buy a cover of 15 million. So what happens to this 15 million is that every year you survive, it adds your value by 3% more. Meaning that 3% of 15 million, that is 330,000. So every year you survive, your cover grows, or your value grows by 330,000. So if you survive, let's say 40 years, you could imagine how much that money is, because you will have 15 million and then 330,000 times 40. Yeah, that's quite a colossal amount. At the same time, you in case, because the life cover does not only cover you when you are dead, no, it also gives you or replaces your income if you're not able to work out of either disability or something called terminal illness. And this is what we do. So you could choose to actually add some more coverage on disability and terminal illness, but the whole life cover has an inbuilt benefit of disability, that in the event I become disabled, I will get 30% of the prorated value. Remember, my value was in the first year was 15 million. See, if I become disabled in the first year, I will have how much? That is 30% times 15, that is 4.5 million will be put on my trust fund or cash trust. And then this cash trust invests this money, and I will be able to get a monthly stipend out of actually the value. Remember, you are still in control of your cash trust. So in the event of if you become disabled, maybe in the next on the 5th year, we are talking of 30% of 15 million, but we say that 15 million keeps on growing by 330,000 every year. So you can imagine this is 300,000 times 5 years, that is 1.5. So 1.5, 1.5 times plus in 15 million, that is around 16 million times 30%. And then you being a wise person, you could also say, if in case I become disabled, on top of that inbuilt cover, add 2 or 3 million extra. So that is how you do it. Now, the wealthy have mastered this art. So what you do is that you set up a cash trust or trust fund, and then below it, you buy a whole life cover for you, your spouse, and any child who is above the age of 18. So let's say I have a cover of 15 million. My spouse have another cover of 15 million. One thing is for sure, if God forbid something happens and we're no longer there, we shall have like 30 million being injected in our cash trust or trust fund, making sure that the children who are below here will still have or will still enjoy life without so much struggle. But again, this money under the trust fund will never be given to them in lump sum. They will be getting some monthly income for survival. And you give instruction to your trust fund so that every time a family member hits 18, they buy a cover of a similar amount, so that every time someone dies, the trust fund keeps on growing and growing and growing. So if that trust is, let's say, 50 years, yeah, if it's 50 years, you can imagine how much amount of money, or let's say even 100 years, those children who call you great grandpa will still be remembering you because of what you did. Remember, the trust does not change, can never be changed by anybody. So because recently we've had people talking of, I will instruct my trust to educate this and that, yeah, even if he's not my relative. So that is the power of what we call the trust fund. So if you want to understand more, because we don't have so much time, and everyone want these tools customized as per their preference, I want to give out my number, which is 0719 265 155, whereby I can help you draft these 2 documents that are very important. That is the cash trust and whole life aspect. So for whole life, when you talk of whole life, we are not talking of you really benefiting, but you've kind of started off a foundation for family, for your generations going forward. Yeah, you could be an ordinary person and you take up a cover of, let's say, 20 million. What happens is, if you happen to go, because you will at some point go, that maybe will have grown to 30 or 40 million will be put in your cash trust, and that is what we specialize on. Feel free to engage us on that comment, and I can as well do you a quotation. You have a look at it, so that we can, because the goal is one, we are fighting poverty and making sure that the generation that comes afterwards does not have to go through what we've gone through. So thank you so much. I really appreciate. I will share more as we go, because this is a house of information. Kenya Insurance Hub. You can always check it out. Subscribe if not subscribed to be getting this kind of information. Like and also share. Yeah. So I want to thank you all for creating time to listen to us. Thank you again.